Welcome to Robots in Depth. Today I'm honored and really excited about talking to Anouk Wipprecht. She is a fashion designer with robotics in mind. She says that fashion is lacking microcontrollers, and I think it sorely does. It really needs more microcontrollers. So let's start where I usually start when I talk to people. How did you get into robotics? I mean, were you a fashion first and then robotics, or was it at the same time? Or
yeah, that's correct. I started with fashion design, and I thought that was really cool because of sort of the expression and also the communication that you can make by the things that we wear. Sort of in a way, fashion is a little bit as an interface, can be an interface, and it was an analog one, and I wanted to make that more electronic and digital. But how I actually started was by the use of like normal fashion study, and I was busy with these fabrics and with these designs, creating designs, and I wanted them to do something, but they never did because it's a fabric, sort of, you know. And I was always trying to find like movement in there by maybe the use of dance or like theater, and it was not my thing because then the whole like the entity and the garment were telling the story, and I want the garments to tell the story, sort of. So I was still doing fashion design, and then I was like, yeah, it's not it, you know, it's not my heart. It's not exactly what I wanted to reach out to. And then I was also looking at robotics and robots, and they had the life, and they had the movements, and they had the eyes, and they were able to they had a face, sort of, you know. And I find that interesting. I found that much more connection to what I wanted than fashion. But it was not the style, because a robot's always something that stands next to you, like R2-D2 from Star Wars or such things. And I wanted to take the robots, and I wanted to take the fabric, and I wanted to meld them together, sort of, you know, that they could collide. So that was what I was starting to do. I was looking at these. First like to have fabrics, and I was putting little motors in there. I started to make them move, and I started to make to animate my fabrics. And then I was looking at the robot again, and I saw that like what made the movements was it had a brain, or it had a heartbeat. That's a microcontroller. So I started to investigate what the microcontroller was, how I could get it. So I was like strapping like big computers to my models, and I was like, okay, this is never gonna work. Like no, it's like there's something to this, you know. But it was huge, you know. It was like big computers. It was like early 2000s, you know.
We're talking about it like a milk carton size, or.
It was like pretty. Yeah, it was bigger than that. Was like half of.
What time frame are we then in? Which
it was
year?
like 2004 or something.
So quite a while ago.
But quite a while ago, like 10 years ago. And then I was like, okay, there's something to that. And then I also at that time was busy more with electronics, looking into electronics and what could be a possibility. And at the same time, the guys of like Arduino, they were setting up this open source platform board, and they were like trying to find out where to market that and where to bring it, and how to really use that as a platform for education, sort of open source and easy accessible. And what they wanted was to get much more people into it, or in a playful way, whether for example engineering sometimes can be hard to get into. It can be for some people like too rational, like all of that stuff, and engineering and mathematics has a lot of rules, you know. Whether the people from like Arduino, they had the mindset of easy accessible and playful. So one of the guys was his name is David Kwartiles, and he did some things in Sweden, and I heard about that. So I was like, okay, hey, cool. This is probably something that is easy to get into and easy enough to start with. And so I came there with the team there. People were like, I think one of their first sort of assignments from speaking from the platform on was like, hey guys, okay, you're here, this is what it can do. They explained a little bit what it could do, and they sent us into the city to get anything like battery volts, or battery powered, or like 5 volts driven, just anything, and just come back and you will see, sort of, you know. So like most of the people did that, they cut back, and that playful way of getting people into their system was really cool, because you really needed to run, you had no idea, sort of. So like we all sourced some stuff. And then the next step was like to get you acquainted with the Arduino, and like, okay, so it's like this open source platform board. We try to like create a community. Like you can write libraries yourself. Like you share them as the means of open source, sort of. So people did that, and we started to build things. So my first things were like creating like a fabric with like little LEDs and make it make it animate and all that stuff. So that was halfway to 2000. 2000, it was like I think 2004, 2005, if I'm correct, around that time. It doesn't matter, but that was just a really playful way of getting acquainted to that. So for me, that was perfect, and that's something that I still try to teach children, their mindset as well. What David and his team learned of just doesn't matter. We're trying things out, you know. So that was cool, and from there on, I started to do more using both their platform as also like exploring other things. Which lends me now to use, for example, the Edison from Intel and such.
Which is a more powerful system, and also even smaller. There are like some Arduino like minis and all that stuff. So I think everything has a purpose, and like I just use my microcontrollers as like if I just want to make a LED blink, I'm using an Arduino. Like no need to use an Edison. If I do wireless biosignals and processing, I would use an Edison and not an Arduino because of the amount of packages that it sends out, sort of, you know. So that has to do with the hardware of that. But so that is a little bit how I came into that, and from that from the working on smart textile or textiles that move to working on a system and creating a little bit system intelligence, coupling sensors to it, and then it just got bigger sort of over time. So basically my system is growing every time I make a new design, every time I make a new dress or a garment or accessory. It's a little bit the same system that I adjust, so it's growing with me. Because you bring the skills you acquired in earlier projects in, and then you can say I can take this experience from there and that experience from here, and add something to it and put them together. Connect the dots. So what we're talking about here is clothing, fashion, stuff you wear. That is active. That is listening to you, the wearer, and it's also listening to the world around it. If people are approaching, and how are you reacting to this person coming towards me? Can you tell me a little bit about that space, because I find it very interesting.
I think it's really a nice set. How I mostly explain it simple is that I try to record the stress of the body, and also I try to record the stress of the environment. So how do I do that? For example, the environment I'm trying to monitor by using an infrared sensor, by using ultrasonic ultrasound, ultrasonic rangefinders, radar. I have designed with cameras in there. Now I'm using at the moment the RealSense, the 3D camera of Intel. I try to connect anything that I see. I see a car and they have this, oh, hey, there's a car. Like, how is it utilizing sensors? And like, oh, hey, cool. I'm trying things out from all sides. So if there's something in a microwave, I would possibly there's a danger factor to that, but I'm really interested in like how objects are sensing at the moment, how vehicles are sensing at the moment, and all that stuff, and I try to implement that. Then from a body perspective is I'm triggering, I'm collecting data through wireless biosignals, so that can be the EEG, the EMG, so muscle contraction or brain waves or brain activity, heart rate, and also the heart volume. So that's cool to sample together. Acceleration, so the place in space. So that can be on several points on the body. The respiration, which can be easily sensed around, like underneath the breast in the waist, above in the waist.
You've done a few of these interactive gear. We've seen pictures and we might be able to cut those in. You've done the bar dress and you've done a spider in many versions, I understand. Can you talk a little bit about the works you created and how they came about?
So some of the first designs that I made were like dresses with like little motors. One is Fragilis. So as soon as you came in the neighborhood of those designs, as soon as they came together, were like two designs, then they started to react to each other, like almost they were happy to see each other, you know. And that was in I think 2005 5 or something. So I started to work out with fabrics. So the next step around that time was that I didn't want to have that materiality. I wanted to cover the body in a sort of non-materiality, and that is when the smoke dress came about. This feeling of having this technology around you that is living with you and omnipresent around you and moving with you, sort of. So I had early version of the smoke dress was with a drip system and with CO2. So it was all good. Then the model was wearing it, and we were in a photo studio. And because of the chemical compounds and the reaction, my model fainted actually. So it was not that bad, but it was okay, we learned from this, and she was a friend of us, and it was we had a laugh about it. But she just had this moment and we were got it, okay. And it was together with Arduino, who I told you about. We were doing the study together. So we were okay, we should not do this, sort of.
We should have done a safety protocol.
Safety protocol for just trial and error. Hey, we're artists,
New model, we'll try again.
No, we're not that. It was not that dangerous. I would not have. But you did certain things apply. But from that you learn. Okay, don't do that. So it was. And then the next system was with a fog system. So the system was the first system was on the ground, pushing it through the dress to see how that moves. Second system was putting the smoke machine on the dress to see how that moves, sort of. And that actually was the effect that I wanted to reach, because the dry ice was also, the effect was less, sort of. And from that I learned that, okay, this is cool, so let's see how we can make this big machine smaller, because it doesn't have to go for hours and hours. We want to have it for an hour. Or something, just for a demonstration or show elements, or to prove out the concept. So you're looking at this machine and you're okay, we can get it smaller and smaller, or you're looking around for other machines, and then from that point on, okay, cool. Hey, you learned from that. You know the different techniques, and you build your own. And so that process, that is for example, that's 5 years how it is now. That I just in hobby time, or just time left, or you saw a new technology and you put it in. And that is really interesting, because also the spider dress has been existing. The very first one was just strapping things to your shoulder and little cords and trying out how the mechanics work. From that on you start to laser cut it. From that on you 3D print it. The next version might be with soft robotics, or with another technique, So that is really interesting about actually how these designs move. And if you look at fashion design, for example, fashion design is built on a system that has to change every 6 months, every 2 months, every week, every 2 days, and it's in and out. And that is actually really difficult, because if you need to put these systems on the market, that's not going to happen in the system of fashion, because my dresses, for example, they get upgraded and updated, and they move with you almost like a leather jacket. A leather jacket you don't buy to throw away. A shirt you would, because of the rule of fashion. The rule of fashion is stating it's in or it's out. If it's out, you should not wear it, sort of. But my for example, the dresses that I designed, they get more intelligent, and what I say, updating and upgrading only entices the design. So that is actually really interesting, or that was what I found really interesting working in this mode. And that's also my reference to, for example, robotics, because if you talk to creators of robots, it's also not that was that. It's no, this has been version 1, version 2, version 3, version 4, and that is also how my smoke dress, how my spider dress, how other dresses are moving through that world for me, sort of. So
And these pieces are then developed for the runway, for special occasions. They're not intended for regular day wear, or even special occasion wear. Am I understanding that correctly?
I'm not even making it for humans at the moment. Most of the designs that I'm making is just for me to research. And every time I put another design out, is a case study for me, a case study of how we can interface in different ways with the world around us. So at this moment of time, I do actually want to keep them case studies, because then I can generate data. Because every time one of my models, or somebody else, or maybe myself is wearing it, like mostly I don't wear it myself because I want to be monitoring, but I get feedback and I learn from that sort of, and I also learn in new ways that we can, in a way, like in the future, would be able to interface, because I have at the moment 36 designs that are case studies for me, and I can say exactly, somebody would come up to me, hey, I have this idea, like, okay, yeah, I have this, I know how this and this works, this feedback I got, and I know that you cannot position this in that way because of the, and that is really interesting, because it's not research on paper, what I do, but I do research in, and I make videos and I can show physical research, like this is not working, and do you understand why this is not working, or hey, let's try this out, or oh, I like this, like maybe we can, so I'm actually like, by having now like 36 designs, I have 36 case studies of the connection between a sensor suite, the body and the surroundings, and the outputs. So the data visualization that I'm collecting, because I'm collecting data. Normally you have that in a screen. So if I'm working with, like, if you're working with neuroscience, like, or like whatever field, like you always have your data back in the screen. And that is what I'm searching to create, this data, because it's on the body, it's living on the body. Like, why cannot not express? And that is how I utilize fashion to be this this interface, or this data visualization of the things that normally would be locked into the screen. And by data visualization, you create a sense with your surroundings, and that's your intimate space, your personal, your social, and your public space, and those are the bubbles that we have around us, sort of. So that is a little bit why I don't care if it's on a catwalk, like it's aesthetic, it's like such things. I do care if it's on one interaction with a person, and this is why I do not do catwalks for that purpose, because it's only the aesthetic, so you look at it, but my designs, you need to interact with it. If you put a person on the stage, it's a performance. I don't want that.
Yes, so that's totally new for fashion, right? The fact that it cannot be shown on a catwalk tells you something really monumental.
It can, but it doesn't inform the design in any way.
No, it doesn't work then, because it has the wearer has to interact with its environment, and it doesn't do that. That
exactly
tells you you're totally disrupting fashion, because the main concept that they're basing it on doesn't work for you, and I just love that. And
there's two things, like you have the fashion industry and you have the technology industry. Actually, all the wearables that are being made now are more from a technology perspective. What I say, things are getting upgraded, updated, yada yada yada. There's no interference at all from the fashion industry, because they're maybe not that interested, or I don't know what's happening there, sort of. Until there's a real purpose, the fashion industry would not be interested in it, because the fashion industry needs to change. It's not in and out anymore. There's might or might not be catwalks. Like I'm not the curator of that part. And also like other things that needs to be solved still. Like one thing with wearables that we have now, and that we need to face the next few years in order to really make these concepts come to real. That's like three things. It's like washability, because we want to wash our electronics. The current washing machines with water, you might.
Electronics and water?
You might understand that, yes.
Not a good idea.
So that's what's one thing, like laundry, how do you, what's happening? Like if these dresses that I create, like how can they be washed and such things. The other thing is energizing, because for example my dresses are still, they make really cool effects, they're really big effects and all that stuff, but they're working on lipos, which you might also know is not that safe.
No, we've had a few of them start to burn and explode. The hoverboard thing here. I'm not using that level of I will never have those problems, and I have good protection circuits. But like it's a thing. Like you don't want to. It's also there. It's when it's on your body, it moves all the time, and there's perspiration. So it's for a robotic system. If you're thinking of this as a robotics engineer, it's a tough environment being on a body.
Yes and no. Like there's a lot of solutions for that, but like there's, for example, your flexible wire in your design. You really look at all the friction points, like all the like push and pull points, and like my system is always in a back pot, totally covered on the back, sort of, But if you put a lot of current through things, or at one point, if we're creating these jackets that can network and like all the crazy stuff, yeah, that is true. If you really like also with if you knit it, like what happens when it rains, like such things are like you really need to be able to like seal it well, and then that's a cool thing. Like a lot of things are happening at the moment, but at the moment it stays still in the laboratory. Like also the things that I'm making that you see, I can show, but there's a lot of things that I work on that I cannot show that are really interesting that will come out the next 2 years. Especially like end of this year, there will be like a new kinds of sensors being launched and such things. So it starts to come, like things start to come out of the research labs, but yeah, it's still not not enough and not quick enough for me. But yeah, so that's another problem sort of. So there's two ways, or you make your batteries better, or you make your systems more low energy sort of.
Both of them
or both, that goes hand in hand. So that's cool developments that we're busy with now in the field. How to make it real, how to make that. And the last thing, so I talked about washability. We want to wash our wearables. We want to energize them because otherwise, they don't serve purpose when they're off. You want also to, if you, for example, sell things, you have maintaining, because if you have a lamp and it doesn't work, you send it back or you repair it. But if your dress doesn't work, like there's only so many people, probably it's only me that can make my own designs, because like you need to or reverse engineer, or you need to have the instructions or how to solve that. So that's another point is maintaining these wearables, for example, do you make it so simple that the person can do that themselves? Do you that's why I like the do-it-yourself movement, Instructables and like all these websites, because it makes people make their own design, so they inform themselves, they know how it works, so if it breaks, hey, you can make it yourself. And that's a really interesting idea about like creating, for example, accessories and just giving it as a suite, and people program and do that themselves, so they learn, so they educate, and they also know if it breaks, for example. So that's a funny way of thinking, but for the big mass, if you're producing like smart jackets or whatever, if it breaks, it's being sent back, and like what you say, there's a lot of friction on the body from all kinds. So that is another thing. And the last thing that I want to name is networking and bandwidth. So these designs are, if there are designs that are interconnected, sort of, they need to be interconnected at all time. That is like a rule. So those are the 4 things that still need to be solved. And what I say, there's a lot of things going on, but that's still also a little bit a talk that you not only need to have with the technology industry, but also with the fashion industry, sort of.
Fascinating stuff. Do you have a goal of actually becoming available to the general public sometime in the future? Yeah,
only like sort of the experiments that I do. Like I'm a little bit too focused on like a whole bucket of possibilities. Because if I want to, if I create something. I want it to be not just a trickle-down version of what I actually can. I want it to be as badass or like amazing as, for example, the designs that I'm making now. So I do want to make things available. I'm doing now at the moment a project for Ars Electronica, which is not for the mainstream, but it's focused on kids with ADHD. And it's actually a unicorn horn, and it's pretty cute. And there's a little camera in there, and also electrodes. So the system is able to recognize attention deficit. So from the P300 system, and that is has to do with your brainwaves, and that I want to make available for for example, therapeutic settings. But what I'm doing, I'm not selling it. I'm just going to put it online so people can I don't get money for it. Like I don't want to have money.
Make it available as a part of
as so
open
people
source.
So people can get open source, so people can use it as an instrument themselves, or hack it or tweak it or whatever they want to do with it. Because I'm always a little bit bad, but like things for me are not about money. Things for me are about just making a better world, and that's why I really highly support the open source community, the makers and all that stuff, because in a way, like without me being involved with Arduino, I would not have been here, and Arduino is also open source.
We love the open source here on the show. It's we see the open source ROS operating system, and we see all the open source movement giving
Yeah.
so many opportunities and
Yeah.
possibilities for so many. It's
Yeah.
an amazing thing.
Yeah.
So say that we step into the future now a bit. We are a number, maybe even a number of tenths of years in the future, and your stuff is now commonly available. When we go out to buy a jacket, a dress, a shirt, a pair of shoes,
Yeah.
these features are where the fashion industry is competing. They're not competing with patterns and colors only, they're also competing with functionality or communication options.
Yeah.
How would you see us using these? Because I would presume that the activity coming from me, my moods, my relationship to the levels of my private sphere, my intimate sphere,
Yeah,
my
yeah.
private sphere, and so forth. How would you see us as people communicating how we feel between each other? Are my clothing gonna tell you, or even your clothing,
Yeah.
things about my state of mind? Or
Yeah.
how do you see that the eventual use of all this?
Yeah. Yeah.
Disregarding whether it's actually going to work today or not, we presume that in 10 or 15 or 20 years time we could get amazing things to work, right?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, so there's two things. Like what I'm focused on is what I already said, fashion. And for me, fashion and clothing are two different things. Sort of clothing you just use like regularly every day. We all know that, and it's protecting us and it's sheltering us, and it's therefore like just
Because we get arrested if we don't wear it.
we pretty much get arrested if you don't wear it, sort of, yeah. And
but
then
it also tells you a lot about what a person, if you wear something, it tells you
Yeah.
something about that person.
Yeah,
right?
no, yeah, that's what I want to say. Distinction between normal garments and clothing and fashion. And fashion is to express and to communicate. And I use that in a sense of like, wearable technology and all that stuff in order to make that communication like different, sort of. So there's two things. Like from a garment perspective, like you see things that can, like for example, harvest energy. That's like by a kinetic movement. Like you have like all kinds of stuff, like solar panels. You have things that can like inform others, like garments that for example that give notifications. You see a long range of garments that are lighting up, for example. You have like for example shoes, which I really like, with soles that can see how your gestures are or can inform you that you're standing not correct and all. So that's a little bit more the health health perspective. Then you have like a sort of the vision of fashion of like 2050 or like 2020 or like earlier. Actually, it's happening now already. It's the idea that fashion would be emotive, that it would display your emotions, and that's talk that we actually touched upon before. Like it's a really interesting vision, but like the vision of like displaying your emotions goes well until a certain point, until the point that you're always happy. Then you have this like really flowery dress or this certain like suit with a patterning or something that is like super like visual. But like what happens if you are sad or mad or
or very focused on something. Maybe if I walk by you in the office, I can tell I'm not going to disturb her now. She's in the zone. And
so this is like a funny duality. Like and you don't actually like it. It sounds really good, like garments that are showing your emotion, but you need to. And I love it. Totally, everybody should do that, but you also need to take in consideration that you also display when it doesn't go well. And like as an example, you have Facebook. A lot of people post if they're happy on Facebook. They don't post when they're sad on Facebook. But if you have true wearables that are really true and generating data in a raw manner, you also get raw data, and your raw data is not always happy, you know. So this is a funny thing, and that is how I try to blend also moody garments, because actually my garments are not behaving; they're misbehaving. Like my spider dress is like, it's sort of protective, it's like defensive, or like, these things are like interfering, they're like disturbing a little bit. And that is something that I try to focus on with my the things that I make, to also see the mental, the characteristics that you can put into wearables, not only the aesthetic. I think that's goes until a certain behalf, but also the interaction that you can create what I say, how things can would be able to emerge you or help you or get you out of a certain situation or into a certain situation because you want to communicate. One thing that I really find, and I hope that me and many others can move into that, like we are moving in that direction, but focus on more. One thing is that what I say, things are too much for me in screens. That is from the data that I collect that you see, also a cool user experience, like nice, like a nice interface, but I want to feel that, I want to have that around me, like in these things. The other thing is technology. When I was small, and that's personal opinion, when I was small I looked up to electronics and like robots and like buzzers and like all that stuff, like mobile phones later on then, but like such things, it was like, whoa, that is sort of the achievement, you know. And now it's sort of a token of stress, because now if I open my mobile phone it's like, hi, you know, you
so many messages and so much to do. And
So like, I took steps for that, but like it's like, it's almost a token for stress, and I think that is something that I want to touch upon with my work. Is like that's technology came into our lives like with the purpose of helping us, and that was in a way a rule. Like we have in robotics we have the rules, you know, but does it still, you know, like the technology that is around us, does it still help us, and doesn't it overwhelm us, like in many ways, sort of, you know?
We have to learn how to control it and to realize the technology is there for me, and I can decide how I use it. I don't have Facebook on my phone. I don't. I have a kind of saying that this is what I want to use it for, and the fact that it can be used for other things might suit other people, but it doesn't suit me, right? And we have to learn that with every new technology we introduce into our lives, we have to learn how we control it, and to a certain degree it's individual.
That is one thing, but that's more from a software, like that's from that perspective, but you always have to face your display, like it's always a display, sort of of course it's your choice that you can say like, okay, yes, I do this app, and yes, I want to chat, or no, I don't want to chat, certain things, you know, but the fact that it's always this display that we need to interface with, I do not agree to that, sort of, you know, like, and I think in a way, like the things that we can wear can be like perfect substitutions, like it will never change a display that is the same way as, like, for example, we will always use a fork, but you might want to use a spoon, or you might want to use other instrumentations.
We can add stuff to our repertoire.
Now our whole instrument is that one thing, and I see that much more being informed around you, moving into the fabrics, giving notifications, and especially, for example, things. If you think like in things of dementia, for example, touch and the feeling of touch is really important. So the more, like, for example, people with dementia would be having an all-rounding feeling, and it's the same notion of Pado, the robotic seal, actually. It gives a feeling of empathy. So if you can create this notion of empathy with tactile things on your body that have moved in the fabric, it's actually a talk you have with your metabolic system, and that's really interesting, because you're enticing your metabolic system by the use of garments, which are like, that's a totally interesting thing to broadcast, and the feeling of such things. For example, if a person with dementia really
this is the garment can communicate out the wearer's feelings, but it can also take
I think there's two things. You have the external and you have the internal. So the
communicate that back to the
thing
wearer.
For you, or the the thing that
very interesting. Very interesting.
I guess, but so that is also like the most of the designs that I have are like they're extrovert, because I want to show, I want to demo, I want to create that interaction, you know. So you have this. So playing with these spaces, what I do with the sensors, and then the inward, the things, the secrets maybe, or the things that are for you to help yourself. And like actually, if you like, that might be a good example. If you look now at the current state of wearables, like the activity trackers, and the heartbeat, like the sleep pattern recognition, all that stuff. Actually, it's informing you, so that's okay. But it's not really high level, because it's mostly just informing you, like, hey, you're unhealthy, and like, oh, okay, I'm unhealthy, damn it, you know. And it's informing, and that's the reason why a lot of people throw it away because it's informing them, and it's not always really doing something. Hey, you're unhealthy. I would suggest doing this and this, and that's a piece of intelligence that you can put into the interactivity that you have with your system or with the little extra brain that you implant on your body, sort of, And I'm really interested in like a new generation that is asking these questions, what I say, that behave and also misbehave, because if your system is always telling you like, oh, this and that just informs you, you don't learn from that. Like that's not just like a person telling you the whole time like, oh yeah, you should not bite your nails until your finger bleeds. Then it's like, oh, I'm not gonna.
It has to communicate with you in the right way.
It needs to get that conversation going, sort of. It needs to
it needs to be able to tell you when you're improving, and now you're going in the right direction and stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah, such concepts I always find much more interesting if it can inform or really push you, but also challenge you. And I think maybe I say it incorrect. Like the current state of wearables, they inform you and they maybe raise that question, but they never would go into an uncontrolled state or some state that you can actually learn from the information that is being. It's hard to explain.
Yeah,
like
but
I could have been.
I
could have explained it. Doesn't matter. Yeah,
it's a very new area, and I realized that you're not only developing the area, you're developing a way of talking about it, a way of thinking about it, a way of. I mean, there's no language in general. Fashion and creation of clothing. There is a language you can speak about it, and in robotics we have a language to talk about it.
But this is really
How do you explain what you're doing and what's the words?
Yeah, but that is why you make these things. That's
show them instead. Show
sort
not
of. Yeah,
show
it's
not
a case
tell.
study. Yeah, it's like because it's really hard because I was giving a talk here at Schunken before somebody asked me what I was doing. I was like, okay, how to? So I try to explain. I try to explain like, hey, like this and that, and like try it in different ways. But you need to really see my designs, and if you see them 1 second, oh, I understand. Like a little boy walking up to the spider dress knows, oh, I should not come close, or my grandmother, and they don't need to know anything about the technology, or they don't need to know anything about the product. They know, they woke up and it's like, okay, don't come close because it's relating to animalistic behavior, or it's relating to these defense mechanisms that we correlate to because we're human and like all that stuff. So sometimes it's for me hard to explain, but it touches a lot of questions that are actually in robotics, that are actually in wearables, and that are actually in interaction design or engineering going on. But because I know the answers, but by prototyping it, I can go into that dialogue with it, sort of, and that is I think really important. Like a lot of things are being written, also a lot of research, a lot of papers, and but I am always really demoing, mocking things up, trying things out, prototyping. That's also if I'm like that I tell my students or like the people if I'm doing workshops, like really the importance of just trying it out. It might fail, but you might get this really interesting display of possibilities or things that are unknown that you didn't know of, before. Like if you're only writing about it, you really need. We're humans. We're not robots. Like if you would be a robot, like I would know exactly what's going to happen, or like it's very. Like linear, or it's very matrix, sort of, but because it's another human that you're interacting with, for example, it can go all ways. Like there's so many possibilities. So I think that is one of the really this important things of really making things real, trying things out, seeing how it reacts, and not only, for example, in one culture. Like, for example, for my designs to really roar on the idea of personal space, it needs to go to every culture. Every human needs to be in contact, gathering that data, and then you can make uitspraak, I don't know the word for it, a suggestion.
Expression.
Yeah, because otherwise, again, it's not raw, it's not true. But so it's always this notion. But I really do believe by this more physical or physical research that you get a lot of interesting things out of it. Yeah. Because you're defining new things, you're defining new ways, you're defining new methodologies, sort of.
So you have a unique experience coming in this fusion between fashion and robotics. Do you have any advice for somebody that today is in fashion or in robotics and feel an interest in entering this combined space? Go to your local hacker lab, get interested in Arduino, but how do you do if you are a Arduino guy but want to go into fashion, where's the fashion hacker labs?
That's
Can you talk about
question.
How do we do these two? How do we get these people together?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question actually, so what I say you would first of all is a lot of people, what I say again, there's a lot of poetics to the future fashion. There's a lot of poetics to things like fashion and art and such things. It's the same idea of how do you or any other person or the neighbor get into art, for example. You need to have a target, why you need to find your interests. One of the questions for me is hey, I'm interested in robotics, and then it's oh yeah. Well, nothing is going to happen if it stays there. I'm interested in robotics because of the moving aspect, the motorics. I'm interested in because of the intelligence. Or hey, okay, that's cool, but how do these movements exist? How does that intelligence get programmed? That's the microcontroller. So you're zooming in. So okay, this is the thing that I want to learn. This is the thing that I want to do, and this is the thing that I want to make from that. And sometimes people that you need to get in there. You need to have an attitude, it's a determination of what you want to, what you actually want to reach with that sort of. Because I think, if you are a designer, if you ask any designer or architect or a designer scientist or a cook even, if you look at that, what are they doing? They are disagreeing with something, they disagree with the way cities are built or a building is built. They disagree with the way products are made or the user experience of holding these products. A cook is disagreeing with the current state of food or the current state of food in his area. I disagree on, for example, the current state of robotics. They're standing next. I want to have them living on my body. I disagree with fashion because it's not interactive. So one thing is from an engineering perspective, for example, it's okay, it's not really a system that you need to build. It's a system that you need to design. And design has to do with a vision or a mission or an aim. So yeah, you can say you cannot do design unless you really have this just the idea or hey, and that doesn't have to be the whole the whole Eiffel Tower. It's just a notion of hey, okay, I want to create a first step or a first fascination. Look around you. Why do you want to get into fashion? And as from an engineering background, it might be the idea of interfacing or the idea of having these, what I have reactive systems around my body, but it can also be because, what you say, I'm doing VR, but there's no tactile feedback. I want to do that. So what kind of personal experience can you think of that would solve by you stepping into the direction of design? And that is, I think, a question that you need to learn yourself. For example, I have an Arduino, that's cool. Yeah, it's very empty if you just have an Arduino. What do you want to do with it? Do you want to connect a motor to it? Do you want to connect a light to it? Is that any of your interest, or do you want to create the impossible? So what's the impossible? I don't know. Go search for it, So it's always you need to have it can be blurry, but just a notion, because otherwise you never start with it in a way. So what is it that you want to solve? What do you disagree with in this world? And how do you think that, that through the design or the intelligence that you have, because we're all specialists in something, how can that make a difference? How can that make an influence, or how can that give an influence on the thing that you want to reach out to, sort of? So I think it's more, but it's more, of a mindset. What I would suggest, sort of, there's a lot of for example, people coming to me oh, I want to do what you do. Tell me what's your, and it's oh yeah, here's a list. And it's not working that way, It's
you have to find your own way.
What, for example, I was in if I'm doing courses, sometimes you see people replicating the things that I'm already doing, or they try to sketch out. So okay, they like the aesthetic of that, of the style, for example. Because I'm always asking them, okay, cool. So you come here to this workshop. What do you like about these designs? designs, or which design do you like? Why do you like it? And then you go into all these questions, and then they're like, okay, yeah, no, I want to create this like dress. If you come close, it starts to you hear the sound of breaking glass, for example, and it's like, oh, perfect. Okay, and then you go through them like, okay, so this is your idea. Do you already have a feeling? Do you want the design to be informed by design? Do you want it to be informed by the technology? Like, how can you look up into that sort of? And then the next, okay, so you want this. How can your system look like? How can we engineer that? Next step is interaction. How can we program that? And then you make a prototype. And then so these are all steps that you need to go through, and that's a personal opinion sort of. So it's it's more like really finding your fascination, I think. But
very interesting. It's been an amazing experience to hear your work and what you're doing. I'm very grateful for you taking the time to do an interview.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks for all the questions.
This episode is sponsored by Aptomica. Everything you need in modular robotics. Or robots up close, what's going on in robotics, online and on the road. If you like this interview, don't forget to subscribe, follow us on Twitter, and subscribe to our email newsletter on robotsinDepth.com. You can also support the show on Patreon.